question about the changes on February 7th, 2020. Hi, this is Barry Branton. I received a question from CC27866. He says, how many tests before I get my permit? Well, I don't really know what the answer would be to that, depending on what he wants to get. But I can tell you after February 7th or on February 7th, there will be additional tests to take. What he says that's relevant here is February 7th, they're changing the rules for entry-level CDL, and that is correct. It's just another hoop for newbies to jump through. That's my response. However, the written exams at the state level are still required. Under the new requirement, an entry-level driver must successfully complete a prescribed program of theory, knowledge, and behind the wheel, BTW, range, and public road instruction. The training must be provided by an entity listed on the FMCSA's, that's Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, on their Training Provider Registry, TPR, prior to taking the state-administered CDL skills test. Now, that's not the written test. That's the second test you take, the skills test. However, for the Hazmat endorsement, prior to taking the knowledge test, that's if you're taking the Hazmat. The rule applies to operators of commercial motor vehicles, CMVs, in interstate and interstate commerce who are, 1, applying for a CDL or Class B CDL. That's the first one was Class A CDL. The second one is Class B CDL. Number 2, upgrading their CDL. That is, they're going from a Class B to a Class A CDL, or obtaining the following endorsements: passenger endorsement, or school bus endorsement, or hazardous materials endorsement for the first time. So the ELDT requirements do not apply to individuals holding a valid CDL or a passenger, school bus, or hazmat endorsement issued before the compliance date of the final rule. Compliance date, February 7, 2020. The rule does not cover individuals for whom states have waived the CDL skills test under 49 CFR 383. So, you can see links in the description below, please. New rules start on February 7th, 2020. The commercial transportation industry is filled with acronyms, so it's no surprise that the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's FMCSA new entry-level driver training rule, which goes by the acronym ELDT, is in effect on that date, February 7, 2020. The entry-level driver training, or ELDT rule, which was implemented on February 7th, 2020, which will be implemented on February 7th, 2020, establishes a new minimum training requirement or requirements for individuals who want to obtain a commercial driver's license, CDL, or, again, upgrade to a CDL from Class B to a Class A, or obtain one of the following endorsements: passenger, school bus, or hazardous material endorsement for the first time. The requirements do not apply, the requirements for those who instruct these individuals are also changing. That's true also. Okay, see links in the description. General information. Key requirements. Under the new requirements, an entry-level driver must successfully complete a prescribed program of theory, knowledge, and behind the wheel, BTW, range, and public road instruction. The training must be provided by an entity listed on the FMCSA's Training Provider Registry, TPR, prior to taking the state-administered CDL skills test. That's the second test. You take the written test first, then you take the skills test. Now there's a distinguishment here, which is for the H endorsement prior to taking the knowledge test. So if you're taking the Hazmat endorsement, you'd have to take it prior to taking the knowledge test for the Hazmat. All right. Who must comply? Okay. The rule applies to operators of commercial motor vehicles in interstate and intrastate, that's within the state, commerce, who are 1. Applying for a CDL or Class B CDL. That's applying for a Class A or a Class B CDL. Upgrading their CDL, that is from a Class B to a Class A CDL. Or obtaining a passenger, school bus, or hazmat endorsement for the first time. The ELDT requirements do not apply to individuals holding a valid CDL or endorsements for passenger, school bus, or hazmat issued before the compliance date of the final rule. The rule also does not cover individuals for whom states have waived the CDL requirements under 49 CFR 383. What is the compliance date? The compliance date of the ELDT rule is February 7th, 2020. Individuals who obtain a commercial learner's permit, CLP, on or after February 7th, 2020 will have to satisfy the applicable requirements. Individuals who obtain a CLP before February 7th, 2020 are not required to comply with the new ELDT rule as long as they obtain the CDL or endorsement before the CLP or renewed CLP expires. Is there a mandatory order in which the training must be administered? There is no mandatory order in which the theory, BTW range, and BTW public road training must be administered. Also, the rule does not apply that theory training must be completed before obtaining a CLP. So you can take the CLP or get the CLP before you do the training. Can theory and BTW be provided by separate training providers? Theory and BTW training may be delivered by separate training providers, as long as each provider is listed in the FMCSA's TPR. Both providers must submit driver-specific training certification information, that is, proof of training, to the FMCSA. Okay. However, driver trainees must receive both range and public road portions of the BTW training from the same provider. And BTW is behind the wheel. So the BTW training is actually two parts. You've got the range part and the public road part. So that training has to be received from the same provider. What impact does the ELDT final rule have on existing state entry-level driver training requirements? States will be allowed to keep their own entry-level driver training requirements that exceed the new federal minimum standards. However, the final rule does not prohibit driver trainees from obtaining training outside their state of domicile. Therefore, any entry-level driver training requirements that may exist in the licensing state would not be applicable to the driver trainee who obtained the skills training outside that state, even if he or she returns to the licensing state to take the skills test. Theory knowledge training. What is the minimum number of theory instruction hours required? There is no minimum number of hours that driver trainees must spend on the theory instruction, so there is no minimum required. What areas, topics, must be covered in the Class A or Class B CDL theory training? There are 5 areas of theory and training topics. So the first one of those 5 would be basic operations, which covers orientation, control systems dashboard, pre-trip and post-trip inspections, basic control, shifting, operating transmissions, backing and docking, coupling and uncoupling, Class A only. Number 2, safe operating procedures, visual search, communication, distracted driving, speed management, space management, night operation, extreme driving conditions. Number 3, advanced operating procedures, hazard perception, skid control, recovery, jackknifing and other emergencies, rail highway grade crossings. That's railroad highway grade crossings, pardon me. Number 4, vehicle systems and reporting malfunctions, identification and diagnosis of malfunctions, roadside inspections, maintenance. And lastly, number 5, non-driving activities, handling and documenting cargo, environmental compliance issues, hours of service requirements, fatigue and wellness awareness, post-crash procedures, external communications, whistleblower and coercion, trip planning, drugs and alcohol, medical requirements. And we have an addendum which already occurred on March 5th, 2019. The FMCSA amended the level of theory training for individuals who are upgrading from Class B to Class A CDL by removing 8 topics within the area of non-driving activities. However, Class B CDL holders upgrading to a Class A CDL are free to choose to complete the Class A theory instruction standard curriculum. This amended rule applies only to Class B CDL holders. Individuals obtaining a Class A who do not already hold a Class B CDL must complete the full Class A theory standard curriculum. What topics must be covered in the theory training to obtain a passenger endorsement? The passenger endorsement theory training must be, at a minimum, or must at a minimum contain the following: post-crash procedures, other emergency procedures, vehicle orientation, pre-trip, en-route, and post-trip inspection, fueling, idling, baggage and or cargo management, passenger safety awareness briefing, passenger management, Americans with disability, ADA compliance, hours of service requirements, safety belt, safety. Also, distracted driving, railroad, highway grade crossing, drawbridges, wait stations, security and crime, roadside inspections, penalties and fines. What topics must be covered in the theory training for a school bus endorsement? School bus endorsement theory training must, at a minimum, contain the following: danger zones and use of mirrors, loading and unloading, vehicle orientation, post-crash procedures, emergency exit and evacuation, railroad highway grade crossings, student management, special safety considerations, pre- and post-trip inspections, school bus security, route and stop reviews. Now, what topics must be covered in the theory training to obtain a hazardous materials endorsement? The hazardous materials H endorsement theory training must, at a minimum, contain the following: basic introductory hazardous materials requirements, operational hazardous materials requirements, reporting hazardous materials crashes and releases, tunnels and railroad highway grade crossing requirements, loading and unloading hazardous materials, hazardous materials on passenger vehicles, bulk packages, operating emergency equipment, emergency response procedures, engine, fueling, tire check, routes and route planning, hazardous materials safety permits. What is the minimum score driver trainees must achieve on the theory assessment? So yes, there is a theory assessment, basically a test. It says the rule requires that driver trainees demonstrate their understanding of the material by achieving an overall minimum score of 80% on the theory assessment, written or electronic. That's 80%. In the next video, we will be covering behind the wheel BTW range and public road material. So, what is the minimum number of BTW instruction hours required? In what class of CMV must the BTW training be conducted? What topics must be covered in the Class A or Class B CDL BTW training? What topics must be covered in the BTW training for a passenger P endorsement? What topics must be covered in the BTW training for a school bus endorsement? Completion of training. Okay, so what happens when a CDL applicant completes the training? And then under Training Provider Registry, what entities are included in the Training Provider Registry? What are the minimum qualifications for an entity to be eligible for listing on the TPR? And when will the Training Provider Registry be operable? Okay, thanks for watching this presentation.